All right, everybody. I'm Tracy Wallace. Welcome to the Preparing for the AZ-103 Microsoft Certified Azure Administrator Associate exam. I want to thank our extremely capable digital marketing person who had to leave the room because I forgot to actually mute the right speakers. I muted speakers, but I muted the wrong ones. So there we go. Great start. Anyways, I definitely want to welcome you all in. I'm glad you're all here. And we're going to talk about the AZ-103 Microsoft Certified Azure Administrator Associate exam, which you have to take a deep breath before saying that. Microsoft has definitely seemed to be lengthening their titleage for their exams. I am Tracy Wallace. I am an Azure Solutions Architect Expert. I am also an Azure Administrator Associate. If you want to get in touch with me, be more than happy to have you get in touch with me. You can see my email address there, my Twitter, and my LinkedIn. And please follow me on Twitter. I'm desperate for followers on Twitter just because, you know, it feels really good to have the numbers. All right, but enough about me. Again, though, do not hesitate to reach out. All right, the topics that we're going to cover, and I will tell you we're going to cover these relatively quickly, and only because I want to make sure that we have time at the end for any questions you have related to the exam or really anything INE related. I'd be happy to answer. The topics that we're going to cover, we're going to talk about the Azure Market, which is a little bit difficult to pin down. I'll talk about that a little bit, but definitely some broad numbers that I think you can take away confidently. Talk about what to expect on the exam and also how to prepare. And then you'll notice the next 5 topics, those topics are actually the objective domains of the exam itself. And we're going to go in there, and I'm not going in and covering the details in this course of what you need. We have a 25-hour long course for that right now. But I want to give you kind of the big picture, the things that you want to make sure you're focusing on and that may not be obvious that you want to make sure you get. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. I'm going to start out taking a look at the Azure market. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to tell you, as far as any cloud market, all of this, no pun intended, is very nebulous, right? How big the cloud market is and what basic percentage different providers have kind of depends on how it's being calculated and, quite frankly, who's telling you. Okay, I think that, you know, this comes from Gartner, fairly a very trustworthy provider of information, and you can see the predictions not too far out, 2021, all total over $250 billion of cloud revenue. Now, a lot of that is application services, software as a service, right? If we take that out, and we look at this, you know, you're still looking at a pretty good market as far as infrastructure as a service, management security, and application infrastructure, all right? And also, when you look at the pie, this is the one that literally every resource you go to is going to show this differently because it just, the numbers aren't directly published, first of all. Microsoft, for example, has that combined with other numbers within their overall financial reporting. So what you can say with some certainty is that Amazon is the biggest and Microsoft is the second biggest. And, you know, I understand that you may have ratios that are a little different than this. You know, I love to communicate, but please, you know, you can send me an email, but if you send me an email, say, well, this source says it's different, I'm going to agree with you, okay? But the point is that it's a pretty big market, and Microsoft has a pretty big chunk of that market. And a lot of the market is infrastructure, people taking their virtual machines and transferring those virtual machines up into the cloud, right? And really, that's what the AZ-103 focuses on, which is a shift from previous certification paths. By the way, one thing I do want to point out, I've already got a couple of good questions in the Q&A. I will probably save the Q&A till the end just so I can kind of get through the flow. Great questions. I just want to let you know I do see them, and I will absolutely get to those. So don't hesitate to put questions in there. All right. Now, what about the market for you? Okay. What's the overall career? From payscale.com, you can see kind of average job numbers there across the board. Not going to go too deep into that. You can see system administrator, 65,000. But when you pull in some certification numbers, national average for Azure Administrator is 105,000, pretty significantly better than standard sysadmin. Cloud computing average overall is 127. That's including things like architects, developers, et cetera. And generally speaking, Microsoft certified technologists earn 15% more for the same job than those who are not certified. And 27% of Microsoft professionals are going to see a pay raise based on the certification. Right? I'm not selling you certification, but if you're in here and you're wondering, why do I want to take the AZ-103 exam? Those are some reasons for it. Very simple, right? It comes down to dollars, and that's not a bad thing. All right, now what I want to do is cover what to expect on this exam. What are you going to go in there, and what are you going to see on the exam? All right, we'll talk about the exam domains. We'll talk about the exam length, the types of questions that you'll get, and then one general comment. Okay, so the exam objective domains. We've got managing Azure subscriptions and resources, which is 15 to 20% of the overall exam total. I'll get to that, what that number means if you haven't taken Microsoft exams. Then we have storage, which is 15 to 20%, virtual machines, which are 15 to 20%, virtual networks, which are 30 to 35%, and identities, which are 15 to 20%. Now, this is always the first place that I go when I am preparing for an exam. I go to the exam objectives page, and these relative numbers, the 15 to 20 to 30 to 35, that does not mean that you're going to get exactly 30 to 35% of the exam. Now, on virtual networks. Now, ideally, when you're in the exam, before you go to the exam, you're going to be absolutely fully prepared. You're going to know everything about everything that could possibly be asked on the exam. Okay? If that's not entirely the case, and you need to do some focused studying, that's what I use this as a guideline for. I'm going to look at what's underneath of virtual networks, and I'm frankly going to study that before I study storage. Okay, I'm going to study them both, right? But it's a matter of where I'm going to put the most emphasis, and I will typically put the most emphasis on whatever the biggest section is. All right, now some additional exam info. First of all, the exam length. It should be around 150 minutes. Never like committing to that, and that is actual exam time. Like overall, it's 180 minutes, but there's going through a survey and answering or leaving feedback, that kind of thing. So it's about 150 minutes of actual exam time. There are over 60 questions, and again, that's kind of give or take because Microsoft does tend to kind of shift that around just a little bit over time. I can't give a guarantee, here's exactly how many questions you get, but that should give you kind of a level of what you would expect to see. Okay? Now, the types of questions that you're going to see. If you've taken a Microsoft exam previously, most of these are going to be pretty familiar. Okay? And there's a couple things that are a little bit out of the ordinary. I'll go through them. So a lot of the questions that you're going to get are going to be standard multi-choice. And this could be choose one or choose more than one solution that meets whatever the question is, okay, or answer that meets the question. Drag and drop. I love drag and drop. They're just kind of fun. I don't know. It's me. It's kind of weird, but it's kind of fun to be in an exam and then just start dragging and dropping things to put them in order. Typically, the drag and drop are process related. You need to do something. What are the steps you need to take in the right order? Sometimes it'll be a series of features and then a series of services and what features go with what service, et cetera. Honestly, for me, those are just kind of a nice little break from the multi-choice. Okay. Now, scenario are relatively new. I mean, they've been around for a few years, all right? And that's not the official name for them. I don't know what is the official name, but it's what I call them. And this is what you're going to get. And I've gotten this on every Azure exam I've taken, where they take a problem, relatively short paragraph problem. Here's what's going on. Here's the requirement. Here's the problem. And then it'll say, here's the solution. Does this solve this, right? And it'll give you one way to solve that. And you simply say yes or no. Right? But then on the next question, it goes and it has exactly the same scenario with a different solution. And you have to answer whether or not that solves it. And it may be the case that you get 4 questions on the same scenario. One of them, or maybe more than one of them solves it, or maybe none of them solve it. But here's the trick with those. You cannot go back. And it tells you this in the exam, but if you're used to kind of flowing through and you don't necessarily notice that, okay, be very careful when you get these, because if you make a mistake on one, that's wrong. You can't go back to it. Another thing that I found, and I actually had this in this exam, is be careful when you're running through, and this is exam taking practice, if you will. There was one where I hadn't realized, I didn't read carefully. I just went and I was clicking through and I looked at the solution. I said, oh, this doesn't solve it. And then I looked up and it was actually a different scenario. Okay, so they're not going to tell you you're switching scenario. So just be careful with that. Now, one thing that surprised me a little bit on an administration exam is that I did get a couple of case studies. All right, and if you're not familiar with the case study is going to give you a typically few pages long scenario. Somebody's migrating their entire line of business application into Azure. Here's what it was. Here's what their problems are. Here's what their requirements are. And then you get a few questions on that, and be prepared for that. Right? And then the one, if you go out and you do a search on AZ-103, and the one that people kind of freak out about is there is now a hands-on element. Okay, and what that means is you are going to be given a task, and then you're going to actually go into a live Azure subscription and complete that task. And you're not going to be graded on there's no multiple choice there. You're not going to be graded on what steps you take. It's just going to look at the end result. Did you complete whatever was asked? If you did, you're going to get it right. If not, you're not. All right, and so that's a little bit new, and that will tend to, as I said, kind of freak people out a little bit. But honestly, I'm glad those are on the exams now, because I think in the end, as they perfect that, that's a much more meaningful certification if we can get more hands-on. It's a really pretty simple thing. All right, now what else do we have? General. I will say this is a tough but fair exam. And I've found that to be the case with really all of the Azure exams that I've taken since they switched over to the role-based architecture that they did in 2018. Yeah, 2018. And they're fair. Like I have to say, I've yet to get 100 or 1,000 on any of the exams, but I also really haven't gotten questions where I said, I don't understand what this question is or why it's here. I've had questions where like, yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to guess it, right? But that was, still an appropriate question. I will say that I generally get through Microsoft exams in about an hour. I think I had, out of the 2.5 hours, I think I maybe had a half hour left when I was done with this one. It was the longest I've taken on an exam in really my recent memory. So be aware, and maybe you'll go through it quicker. I tend to take my time on the exams, but I tend to get through them, like I said, about an hour. This one was definitely at least double that, partially because of the hands-on, but frankly, not entirely because of that. All right, now I'm going to go through preparing for the Azure Administrator exam. And this is my third INE webinar that's going over an exam. And if you've kind of been to any of the other webinars, this really honestly is pretty much the same information. And in fact, I was going to put it at the end of the webinar, so I could be like, hey, you need to fade out for a few minutes. It's cool if you've already seen it. But there's a few things with this exam that I think make it worthwhile to put it really right up front. And so that's why I'm going to go through this. And this section really goes into the process that I've developed over just about 25 years. It'll be 25 years this year that I've been taking Microsoft certification exams. And what I will tell you is a couple of things. First of all, when you take a Microsoft exam, you need a process. You need a process for preparing for it, and you need a process for taking it. It doesn't have to be my process, but you need a process, because that's going to get you through, if you will, the panic points, right? When you look at this massive chunk of information that you need to absorb, and then when you get into the exam, and when you hit these questions you're not sure about, right, having a process is really going to help you out, okay? And I'm going to share with you my process. I'll also talk about why it's important. First of all, INE Azure Administrator Study Tools. We have on our platform, as of yesterday, nothing like getting these things done at the very last minute, we have the Azure Administrator Associate Learning Path up. This includes over 90 videos. It's got over 21 hours of content, and we're going to have over 45 hands-on tasks and 90 quiz questions. They just haven't been fully integrated into the platform yet. Okay? And if you're familiar with INE, we have an INE All Access Pass that you can go ahead and grab and get in there and get this content for one subscription fee. Now, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and show you the INE Azure Administrator Associate Learning Path, because again, they got this up, so the least I could do is show it to you. All right, so this is on our platform right now. I've got the Azure Administrator Associate, and it's got sections. It's got an introduction, which is pretty much this. We've got a little bit of prereqs if you don't have any background and you kind of want to jump in. I've got an overview of Azure and then some intro to design and implementation. And then we get into the actual content, right? And so here I've got subscription and resource management, virtual network management, virtual machine management, storage management, identity management, and business continuity. And you'll also notice that by and large, it aligns pretty well with the objective domains, right? So the idea is that this is not exam prep, it's exam align, right? Ideally, you're getting more out of this than simply preparing for the exam, but it is designed to make it an easy resource if you're preparing for the exam. And this isn't too much selling, I promise. This is just real quick. If you go into one of our courses and you go down and you can see the different videos that are broken out, and they really do align pretty well with what you're going to be studying. Okay, that's pretty much all the selling I'm going to do on the INE stuff. All right, but love to have you come over. Love to have you go through the stuff, give feedback. Fantastic. All right, now what about how to prepare? Okay, so what are my general process for preparing? We're going to talk about some of my study tips and then exam tips. And like I said, with the exam tips, there's one in particular that makes this whole first part, I think, very worthwhile. All right, when I am studying for a Microsoft exam, okay, the first thing I do is I go to their exam information page and I take it and I break it out, okay? And I track my progress at the topic detail level. I literally take the exam information page from Microsoft and I pop it into an Excel spreadsheet, workbook, I guess, right? And I just go along and I tick off. As I get specific details done, I'll tick them off. If I already know them, I'll tick them off. That way I'm really focusing on the things I need to focus on for the exam. All right, humbly I submit, if you're an INE customer already, look at the videos. If you're not and you're interested in preparing, definitely take a look at our All Access Pass. I said no more selling, but that should be it. Okay, but a couple of very serious recommendations. When you are researching, pull your research material from docs.microsoft.com. And the reason you want to do that, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, the material in docs.microsoft.com is coming from the source. This is being generated, and then edited, of course, but generated by the engineers and the support people for, in this case, Azure. And that's really true across their product lines. Okay. Also, the material in docs.microsoft.com is really gets its source from the same source as the exam. And in fact, I will generally, on a given exam, having gone through the docs.microsoft.com, I will usually find scenarios in the exam that really match directly to that content. So, you are completely legally getting some exam source directly going to docs.microsoft.com. Getting a lot more than that, it's not cheating, but it is a very good source. Also, what I found to be very useful are just the Azure pricing pages, right? So let's say you're studying virtual machines, okay? And you want to see differences between virtual machine tiers. Best way to do that, the most concise way to do that, go take a look for Azure virtual machine pricing, right? Or take a look for Azure networking pricing, right? Well, not NSGs, but gateways and load balancers and kind of what are the cost metrics there. And that actually ties to paying attention to tiers, because Microsoft loves asking about tiers when it comes to Azure. These are going to be pricing tiers. For example, I mentioned load balancers, right? There's right now 2 tiers of load balancers. There's basic and standard. What's the difference? Okay, what do they support? And you need to know that. All right, and then a couple other things, just general test prep for really any prep. would say these two things. Take notes. I do this all the time. I've got a tablet and I take notes in OneNote. Never even read the notes, but the act of actually taking notes, it's proven, helps you retain information. And you have to practice. Simple as that, because things are going to be much more understandable if you've actually seen them. It's pretty hard to try and understand complex concepts without getting your hands on them. All right, now exam tips. The whole reason I wanted to go through this section. And item number 1 there, manage your time. Okay. This actually, even given over 2 decades of taking exams, this, for whatever reason, surprised me a little bit. I thought I was done, and I wasn't, because I didn't pay enough attention to my timing. Okay. A lot of people think when they're on this exam, okay, when you get to the hands-on section, when you're actually going through and you're given a task and you're doing it really in Azure in real time, once you're done with that, all right, cool, I'm done. You are most likely not done. Okay. In fact, I had a case study and I also had some additional questions after I went through the actual hands-on. Okay. So at the beginning of the exam, it's going to tell you how much time you have, and it's going to tell you how many questions you're going to have. Now, the questions are a little bit odd because how does that map into what you're doing in the hands-on? Not exactly. Okay. But generally speaking, you know, when you're doing all of the non-hands-on questions, think about the amount of time that you have. All right, I just do a rough calculation, let's say, and it won't be quite this, you know, let's say I've got 60 questions and I've got, you know, 120 minutes, right? Well, then that's going to give me, you know, 2 minutes per question, right? And so if I've got a question where I've been on that question for 10 minutes, I just guess it and skip on, okay? But the bigger thing for this particular exam is understand, A, that the hands-on are going to take a little while. Okay. And also understand that you're going to get questions most likely after the hands-on. So, you know, don't say, okay, I'll just run the clock out on this. Now, if you go and you go online and you do some research and you get exam experiences, you'll see a lot of people talking about how slow the hands-on portion is and how it didn't work right. I think most of those are from its very early inception. When I actually took this, because I had already taken the upgrade exam, I took this actually not that long ago. The hands-on was fine. I really didn't get any delays, no problems. Some of the wording was a little bit iffy, but otherwise it was fine. Okay, other than that, the rest of this, I'm going to go through pretty quickly. It's just really standard exam taking. Make sure you read the questions and answers carefully when you're in the exam. I always do that because I tend to, like I mentioned earlier, I tend to kind of rush through these. And so I'll find myself skimming. And when I do that, I make sure I stop, reread a question, reread all the answers. Also, make sure you eliminate the wrong answers. Even if you read the question and you're like, oh, there's the answer. A is definitely the answer. Go through all the answers. Make sure you can eliminate other answers, because there have been more times than I can count where I've read the question, maybe skimmed it, very bad, and looked at the first answer, said, oh, that's the answer. Then forced myself to read the others and realize, oh, wait a minute, that's actually not the answer. So make sure you eliminate wrong answers before you say, yes, that is absolutely the answer I want. Okay, if you're on a question and you've gone through, you've read it carefully, you've eliminated the wrong answers, and you really have no idea, just guess. But if there's an option, choose the answer that makes Microsoft look the best, right? These questions are going through Microsoft. Okay? And I've definitely found them to be a little bit markety sometimes. Not that there's anything wrong with marketing, but just, when you're in a test, be aware of that. Doesn't always happen, but it's just an easy thing as you're going off and not having any idea what the question is. Might as well take that. Now, kind of related to not having any idea what the question is, second most important exam recommendation, this is general, don't freak out. Okay? You are going to miss questions. I do not think in 25 years that I have ever gotten a 100 on an exam. Come close a couple times. Don't care. Okay? On this exam, you need a 700 out of 1,000 to pass and get your certification. Okay? If you get 1,000 out of 1,000, congratulations, you got lucky. Okay? You're going to miss questions. You're going to get questions that you have no idea where this question came from, and that's okay. I know people who failed exams because the first 3 questions out of the box that they got, they had no idea. And they just were like, well, I failed. And then they did, because they just really weren't in it. I've had exams. I don't know if I've gotten 3 in a row at the beginning, but at least 2 in a row. The first couple questions on the exam, I had no idea where it came from. That's fine. I still passed the exam because I didn't freak out. Okay. It's part of the process. Don't worry about it. All right. So those are my exam prep tips. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and just give some general ideas of what you're going to see, kind of a little bit of where to focus some. So I see I've got a lot of questions, which is fantastic. Okay. And I will get to those. I want to make sure that I do have time for those. I might go a little bit past an hour, but hopefully that won't be too big of a deal. All right, so let's go into the first one, which is managing Azure subscriptions. The topics that you'll have for this, managing Azure subscriptions, analyzing resource utilization and consumption, managing resource groups, and also managing role-based access control. So you need to know all of these, big picture. All right, what are some of the details that you need to know? For managing Azure subscriptions, make sure you understand what the administrator permissions are at the subscription level and how to assign them. All right, understand what quotas are, all right, and also what budgets are and tagging, and how you can use tagging to really control things like, or at least analyze things like cost. Okay, manage subscription level policies. You definitely want to understand policies, and frankly, if you're going into Azure, regardless of the exam, you need to understand policies. So what are Azure policies? How do they apply? What can you do with them? Those you need to know. Okay, resource utilization. I'm not going to go into all of the details, but you definitely want to understand diagnostics, and particularly the new, relatively new-ish structure for diagnostics, where I can set for just about any resource to send diagnostics to one of three sources right now, and it may increase, right? Whether it's storage or log analytics or Event Hub. And know that. Understand alerts, how you can set up alerts, what the process of alerts are, how they break down. I find that to be pretty important across a lot of exams. You're a good chance you'll be asked something about alerts, probably more than one thing about alerts. Spending, right? Understand how to report on spend, understand how to monitor spend. All right, really what it comes down to is understand the cost management capabilities and that interface and what you can do with that, and also understand the cost advisor. Azure Monitor. Azure Monitor is something that is growing in importance. Understand what Azure Monitor is and understand what you can do with it, and also have at least a fundamental understanding of analysis, log analytics queries, which kind of ties into Azure Monitor. Okay. Now, what about resource groups? What do you need to know about these? Well, pretty straightforward. What can you do with or to resource groups, right? Understand policies. There that is again, make sure you know that. Resource locks. Those are, as the one ticket that I've had to submit to Azure that was a real ticket was when I accidentally deleted a production storage account. Oops. Yeah, because I had taken a lock off of it. Make sure you know locks, regardless of the exam. Auditing, understand what auditing capabilities are at the resource group level. Understand how to manage resources in resource groups. How do I move a resource from one group to another? And how do I remove resource groups in general? Okay. Role-based access control. Again, look at this, policies. I may be overemphasizing policies a little bit. They're definitely important, but I've now mentioned them 3 times. Maybe that's a little bit much, but it is still important. As far as roles, understand what roles are available. Certainly the high-level roles, owner, contributor, reader. Also, you need to know how to create your own roles. Okay? It's not something you're necessarily going to have to do, and probably you wouldn't have to do that with a hands-on, but understand the basic structure of a role. All right, now the next thing, storage, implementing and managing storage, 15 to 20%. Okay, so not a huge section, but still, this one, I think by and large, if you work in Azure, so if you have no Azure experience, then obviously all of this is new and you'll need to do it. But I think if you're familiar with Azure, storage accounts are pretty straightforward. Okay? You do need to understand all the ins and outs of storage. What are the types of storage? What are the replication options for storage? What is Storage Explorer? Now, I see Storage Explorer on pretty much every exam objectives page for Azure. I don't know that I've ever seen it on an exam, but it's still a good thing to know. Also, how to protect storage. Network access protection, access through keys, access through shared access signatures, and also now Azure AD authentication. Import, export. Okay, couple things here. The import, export, definitely want to take a look. Make sure you understand Azure Data Box. That is growing, right? And there's a lot of different options for Azure Data Box. You definitely want to know about that. Import and export jobs have been around forever. Again, you kind of want to know all of this, but out of that, I would focus on Azure Data Box. And also, even though off the record, hopefully nobody on Microsoft is listening to this right now, I have very few people I know that actually use the Azure CDN. In terms of preparing for the exam, make sure you understand the Azure CDN. Okay? That's one of those that you might look at and say, okay, that's not going to be important. There's a good chance you'll get questions on the CDN, right? At least a question, probably more than one. Okay, Azure Files. Microsoft is definitely pushing Azure Files, so you'll get some questions on these most likely. Understand what Azure File Shares are, understand how they differentiate from blob storage, and make sure you understand what the file sync service is. And in particular, I would say, make sure, in addition to everything else, that you do pay attention to common troubleshooting issues with the file sync service. Okay, not saying you certainly will get a question on that, but it is definitely fodder for questions and the type of thing that Microsoft likes to ask questions about. All right, Azure Backup. Now, one thing to note, if you are familiar with Azure, you may be familiar with Recovery Services Vault and the fact that it really serves two purposes. It serves backup purpose, and it also serves for replication purposes, availability. Okay? This exam only focuses on the backup component of it. Okay? So understand how to create it, understand the components of backup. Quite honestly, backup's pretty straightforward. You want to get your hands on it. The one thing that took me by a little bit of surprise was the backup reports, because I personally find that to be a fairly minor component, and it needs an outside resource. It actually uses Power BI. Not necessarily something you need to get your hands on, but at least take a quick look at it so you know what it is. All right, next, virtual machines. All right, and again, I'm seeing questions build up, which is fantastic. All right, and I'm sorry, I know this one's a little bit dry, but you know, trying to give you the information here that will hopefully help you get prepared for this. All right, so let's see what we have in virtual machines. We have create and configure virtual machines, automate deployment, manage virtual machines, and manage backups. Okay, so create and configure. Make sure you understand high availability options. So the difference between, say, an availability set and availability zones. You definitely want to know availability zones. Those will be important to you. And just generally configuring. What are the monitoring, networking, storage, etc. And if you are not familiar with scale sets, become familiar with scale sets. If you don't know what they are, well, then that's where research and training is a good thing. But you definitely want to know about scale sets. It wouldn't be something likely that they would ask you to reproduce in a hands-on, but you would probably get some questions about scale sets, at least a question. Automated deployment. This is one of those things, I'm going to take a quick step back. You need to know this. If you're going to work with Azure, if you're going to administer Azure, you need to know automated deployment regardless of whether it shows up on an exam and how important it actually is on that exam. So know what ARM templates are. Okay. First and foremost, that's the biggest thing you need to know out of here. So ARM templates, being able to deploy from a template, being able to save a deployment as an ARM template. All right, create a VHD template, not as critical, but it kind of relates. Choosing a location and deploying, those should be relatively straightforward. But if you are not familiar at all with Azure, then of course you need all of this. If you are familiar with Azure and you haven't worked with templates, strongly suggest for a variety of reasons that you go ahead and pick that up. Managing Azure VMs. So managing them. How do we manage the resources? How do we manage data disks? How do we manage network interfaces? And how can you change VM sizes? Okay, automatic configuration, configuring down below the resource level, down into the data level, okay, the data tier. PowerShell desired state configuration, custom script extensions, and other extensions. All right, you'll want to understand extensions, but the two extensions that you really care about, really for any Microsoft exam, are those two. Okay, be aware that you may see a desired state configuration file. You may not, but you may. And so make sure you've at least looked at those. Okay, being able to manage VMs, most of these are pretty straightforward. Moving VMs, redeploying. Soft delete, that's pretty much if you've got backup set up. Okay. VM backups. Now, you'll notice backup in a few places. All right, there is some redundancy, and there usually is some redundancy in the objective domains. In the INE courseware, we actually have this split out, so it's not redundant for you, but that's just the way we did it. Again, you don't need to worry about the Azure Site Recovery Service in total. You're really just focusing on the backup component of it. Make sure you understand VM backups, how to configure it, how to define policies, how to implement policies, also how to restore. And you do need to have a general overview of site recovery. Absolutely no details, but you need to know what it is. You might be asked a very broad question on that. All right, so next, the big one, configure and manage virtual networks. We're doing on time. I know I'm going through this fairly quickly, again, because I don't want anyone falling asleep on me. But this will be recorded. So if I am talking too fast, you can always go and view the recording and possibly slow it down. I'm not sure. All right, but you know, again, want to get through here, want to get to your questions, etc. All right, so lots of topics here under networking. All right, and let's not even go through this list. Let's just go and hit them. Connectivity. Understand the two basic forms of connectivity within Azure. Virtual network peering, what peering is, how to set it up, and also gateway connectivity, VNet to VNet connectivity, and why you might choose one over the other, which, by the way, unless there's a really compelling reason, you're going to choose peering over VNet to VNet. Not always, but generally, right? It's that last minute, I don't know the answer, and I've got those two, choose peering. All right. Managing virtual network, understand addressing, public IP addressing and private IP addressing. Okay, if you're a networking person, this will be super simple for you because it's a lot easier than doing it on-prem. If you're not, it's still really, I don't think, terribly complex. The only thing out of here that really can get a little bit complicated is understand routing. So understand route tables, routing rules, how they apply, when you would use them. You know, that's going to be important. You need to know what network interfaces are, but they're pretty straightforward. And you have to understand subnetting, but again, relative to, frankly, routing, it's a pretty straightforward topic. Name resolution. Okay, this is one, even if you are an Azure person, you may not be fully aware of DNS options. Study this, okay? Make sure you understand both public DNS name resolution, so public DNS zones, but also understand private DNS zones, how they work, what the terminology is associated with them. Okay? And really, there's not too much other than that, but this is one, you know, put a check mark by this. Make sure you know this because it is important. Okay, network security groups. Network security groups are important because they're important because you should have them, all right? But they're also going to show up on the exam. So make sure you understand security rules, understand how to associate NSGs, and really, if you understand the first two, you understand the second two. Okay, here's an example. By the way, just a little bit of a resource here. Again, if you're watching this on video, you might want to pause. There's a good chance you might be asked for port numbers, right? And associating that with NSGs. These are the ones that are probably the most common. Certainly, if you know every port number out there, that's great. If you don't, these would be the port numbers that I would focus on. Azure Load Balancer. Okay, understand what load balancers are, understand the components of load balancers. And when I say load balancers, I mean specifically Azure load balancers, not something you might get running on a VM. Okay? Understand public versus internal, or how you can have both. Understand the rules, how you set up load balancing rules, how you set up NAT rules. Okay? Also understand the differences between the two pricing tiers, basic and standard. And anytime you see troubleshooting, make sure that you take a look at troubleshooting. And I will tell you from a studying standpoint, you can almost always find an article on docs.microsoft.com that covers troubleshooting for whatever the resource is. So there you go. Use that. Use that in your studying. It will make your life better. All right, monitoring and troubleshooting in general. All right, monitoring on-premises connectivity. All of these things really come down to this. Being able to use Network Watcher, and I'd throw in there Network Performance Monitor. Okay, that's not listed here, but those two things, Network Watcher and Network Performance Monitor together, really pretty much give you all of these different monitoring capabilities. So make sure you are familiar with both of those. Integrating on premises. So we talked about integrating your Azure networks, right? But also understand what your options are for integrating on premises with Azure, so your hybrid networking. Understand VPN gateways. Understand how to configure site-to-site VPN. So site-to-site is going to be on-prem to Azure, and vice versa. Also understand what ExpressRoute is, right? And the difference between using ExpressRoute versus VPN. How can you verify your on-premises connectivity? And how can you troubleshoot your on-premises connectivity with Azure? Again, anytime you see troubleshooting, take a look for a troubleshooting page on docs.microsoft.com. All right, there we go. Now, next thing here, managing identities, 15 to 20%, also known as Azure AD. Okay. What do we need to know here? Again, I'm going to kind of just have this up here quickly, and then we'll go through it. Okay, 4 different subtopics. First thing, understand what Azure AD is. Understand how to manage Azure AD in particular, how to add custom domains, what you have to do to add a custom domain to Azure AD, and how to manage multiple directories or multiple tenants. Okay, and then also some Azure AD features. Now, if you've gone and you've taken like a whole bunch of Azure exams, then this can be a little confusing what you need to know, right? Of course, it's good to know everything, but the 2 that are explicitly called out for this exam are Azure AD Join, joining a device to Azure AD. What are the options there? And there's a couple options. You need to know the details of those. And then also self-service password reset. All right, other things, just generally being able to manage the objects. So understand users and groups and how to manage their properties. Understand device settings, what settings are available within Azure AD. Also bulk operations. How do you bulk load or bulk update user information, and understand what guest accounts are, the different types of accounts, and how you can have an account from a different directory or tenant given access into your Azure AD and given access to the software applications that are governed by your Azure AD, including your Azure subscriptions. Okay, hybrid identities. If you're using Azure AD and you have Active Directory on premises, you probably already have hybrid identity set up. Regardless of whether it's set up or not, you absolutely need to know this. This is a foundational concept for Azure, is how it integrates with your on-prem identity. So you need to understand Azure AD Connect, how to set that up. You also need to know how to set up federation services. Okay? That's one that will make a lot of people freak out. It's not that, well, it's kind of challenging. There's a lot of things to it, but it is absolutely coverable. Also, understand the password sync options as well as the password write back options. So the one, honestly, everything on this is important. The ones that may be less obvious would be the second one and the fourth one. Okay? Make sure you're good with federation and make sure you understand the password sync and write back options. Also, multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication shows up everywhere with Microsoft. Microsoft loves Azure multi-factor authentication. And I mean, honestly, it is pretty cool. Okay, I'm going to assume that everybody's pretty familiar with multi-factor authentication. If you're not, that's going to be the first step. Make sure you understand what it is. Okay, then understand how you can use MFA, how you can activate MFA on individual user accounts, also how you can bulk activate MFA. It's actually pretty easy now. All right, and then also within multi-factor authentication, how do you configure it, right? You can see things like fraud alerts, what are your bypass options, what are trusted IPs, right? And what are the verification methods and how do you set them up? So things like questions or text messages, right? What are the options there? All right, that's it. Well, it's not it. But that's it as far as content that is on the actual exam. Now, I currently have 4 questions already open, and I'm going to go through those. And if you have questions at this point, if I went through something and you're like, you really went through that just way too fast, I have no idea what you said, we have time. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have. You know, again, you want to drill down into some of these topics, fine, fantastic. But now, let me get to the questions that have been answered. One of which was, or they've been asked, excuse me. One of which was actually asked before this even started. Made me happy when I saw this at the beginning. So let's go through these. All right, first question that I've got, how much bash scripting is involved in the exam, if at all? You're not gonna need to know bash scripting. You wanna be familiar with the command line syntaxes, right? Both PowerShell and the CLI, but you're not gonna be asked to put together, most likely not gonna be asked to put together you know, any kind of complex bash scripting. Now I say most likely, that's my caveat. I've never seen it, but I will never guarantee that you won't see something on a Microsoft exam. But let's put it this way, that would be at the absolute end of my list of things I'm gonna study, would be any kind of bash syntax. All right. Why do you think Microsoft has combined 2 exams into one? Do not you think that the exam has become large and difficult? Actually, Max, great question. I actually didn't, it is a tough exam, okay? But they made this decision basically because it was being asked for. And I will also say that the one exam covers less ground than the initial 2 exams. They actually took out a lot in terms of exam objectives. If you're not familiar, previously, the exams, before the 103, there was an AZ-100 and an AZ-101. And then there was an upgrade, which was AZ-102, which was the easiest exam I've ever taken, but that's no longer available, so sorry. And so just talking to folks, they came to the decision that for most things, and the one exception to that, and they say it's going to continue to be an exception, is the architect, where you have 2 exams. But it was really just a market-driven decision. Okay. I heard from other people that the hands-on labs are buggy and takes forever to load. Do you get extra time if that happens? So, no, sorry. As I will say, again, I would go back and talk to those people. My experience, and I've had this on 2 exams, not 2 or 3, actually maybe on 3 exams. I can't remember if I had it on both of the Azure Architect exams or not. I don't think I did. But in any case, I've had it on at least 2 exams. I will say that it's not perfectly responsive, but for me, it did not interfere with me completing my exam. I do know, again, that's probably the #1 complaint about this exam. But I also do know that that's something that has improved. All I will say is this, that, you know, if you're going through and you find that to be buggy, now, if it crashes on you, okay, or, you know, if you finish the exam and it just locked and you couldn't get that bit done and you failed the exam, then you do have, you know, an argument to take to Microsoft to at least get to take the exam over for free. But they're not going to extend the time. But if it does cause you to fail, at a minimum, I would go and talk to Microsoft about that. All right. Let's see what else we have here. A few things. To get practice, not knowing what you can purchase on Azure, what package or so forth would you recommend to purchase to get hands-on experience and practice? Okay, right now, what I would recommend that you do, if you have no Azure experience, that also means you've never touched Azure, okay? When you are roughly 30 days out from wanting to take the exam, what you're going to want to do is get an Azure trial account, okay, a trial subscription. What that's going to do, it's going to give you a 30-day subscription with a $200 credit. That is going to give you everything that you need to get your hands on and play around with Azure. Okay, now the reason why I say you want to do it about 30 days out is because pretty much once you've created a trial subscription, you'll not be able to create another trial subscription. When you create it, it uses a Microsoft account, like a Outlook.com account or a Hotmail.com account, but it also uses your phone number and it uses a credit card. Now, it doesn't charge a credit card, but it does take your contact information, right? And so what I found years ago, I haven't tried to do this in years, is that used to be I could just spin up a new trial account whenever I needed it, and then they kind of stopped that because all my credit cards have the same address. So pretty much you can create a trial account. Also, you can take that trial account and you can convert that trial account to a pay-as-you-go, but then you are paying for it. Many of the services, though, are free or are very low charge, right? So if I'm studying and I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to get all my studying done in 30 days and I don't have, say an MSDN subscription or a corporate account where I can play around and be careful, what I'm going to do is try and do the things that are going to cost a lot of money first. So like things like virtual machines, databases, those tend to be a little bit pricey. Cosmos DB definitely tends to be a little bit pricey, right? And so get those done, and get that taken care of in that first month on that $200 credit, right? And then some of the things like networking, you could probably do pretty cheaply, maybe a couple of bucks here and there. So that would be my recommendation there for that. Do we need to know PowerShell commands and Azure CLI? Sort of. Here's the thing. You're not going to be asked to create a CLI command or a PowerShell command, right? You're not going to be asked to create a statement. However, it is highly likely that at some point you will get a question, and maybe it'll say, okay, you need to do this. Which of these statements would you use, right? And you'll have some PowerShell statements. You'll have some CLI statements, possibly. And here's the thing. I feel like anybody working in Azure should know at least one of the two, and my recommendation is to at least be comfortable with both. But I will also say that I've had exams in Microsoft where I wasn't 100% sure. Honestly, I've never had an Azure question on the CLI or PowerShell that I didn't just know. But you can often kind of noodle your way through those anyways. At least narrow them down to one of two and pick. It was nothing that caused me particular pause when I was going through the exam. Like I said, you're not going to be asked to come up with your own statements. You don't need to use it for any of the hands-on. You can choose to. You could open up Cloud Shell if that's what you want to do, but it's not going to be necessary. All right. How would you compare the AZ-103 exam? That is also another good question. With the AZ-300 and AZ-301, what will be a good exam to do after the Azure admin? So, interesting question. And I have to tell you, I was a little surprised when I took the AZ-103 because I took the AZ-300 and the AZ-301. Let me take a step back. When the new role-based certifications came out in the fall of 2018, somewhere between when they came out and like the end of January 2019, I'd taken the upgrade exams. And the upgrade exams were the easiest exams I've ever taken from Microsoft in my life. That was great. That was shocking. I was almost a little bit worried by it. Okay. And then honestly, when I came here, in kind of early 2019 and started putting together the learning paths for Azure Administrator and then Azure Architect first and then Azure Administrator, I went ahead and I took the actual exams, right? And what I found for the Azure architecture is that it's very wide, okay, but it wasn't necessarily as deep as I expected, right? You need to know pretty much the full range of what's available in Azure, but even though part of it is actually, essentially administration, I didn't find that I needed to go tremendously deep, right? When I looked at the Azure Administrator exam, and it only focuses on infrastructure, I was like, all right, this is cool. This would be pretty easy. I probably found the admin exam a little bit more difficult than I did the two architecture exams. All of them I scored almost the exact same on. Okay. As I said, the admin took longer than the architect, but I did well on both, or well, I should say all three, because I took both of the architecture. And really kind of comes down to just understanding that you've got to go into those details, study those, know those, and you should be okay. And I know that sounds like a total cop-out, but that really is just how it goes. You're going to go deeper on the admin, you're going to go wider on the architect, is kind of how that works. As far as what's next, I mean, I would say if you're taking the admin now, I would definitely take a look at going into the architecture. Particularly, the architecture will touch on some development topics, but I personally didn't think, now I'm a developer, but I didn't think that it was anything that should scare someone off. The old architecture exam, people freaked out because there was like a lot of development stuff and you needed to actually read code. I can't think of too many cases where I needed to do that for the architecture. I do go through code in our learning path for that. But also, if you already have both of those, definitely I would say take a look at the Azure Security Associate. That's actually right now we're working on the Azure fundamentals, kind of work backwards, went architect, admin, now I'm doing fundamentals, that'll be pretty quick. As soon as I'm done with fundamentals, I'm gonna move on to a learning path for the Azure Security. I think security in general is an important and valuable topic. And if you're getting certified in Azure, it's definitely a good one to have. All right. Will future AZ exams cover Windows Virtual Desktop? That could seem like a hot service in the industry and Microsoft. All right, this is pure speculation. I doubt it as part of the Azure kind of, how am I going to say it? I doubt that it would be covered in any depth whatsoever as part of a general Azure exam. If it in fact does get hot, I could see Microsoft coming out with a certification specifically for that. I could also see that getting rolled into, and look, again, this is complete speculation on my part. I could see that getting rolled into modern desktop, right? Because pretty much modern desktop's mostly Windows 10, but it does have some virtualization, and so that would be a very natural fit for it. So I wouldn't expect it to be in the general Azure certifications. I would expect it to show up somewhere, whether it's on its own or as part of the modern desktop path. All right, next one, Q1. Do you have any recommendations for books to combine with INE video learning? I'm better at learning while reading about it as well, besides what can be found. All right, here's the thing. Honestly, my answer to that's no. Okay? And the answer to that is no for the following reasons. Because I find that the books are pretty derivative of what's on docs.microsoft.com. I read a lot when I study, but I read from docs.microsoft.com. Now, look, everybody studies differently. And so my only recommendation as far as a book is that, if there are certain publishers that you are very comfortable with, whether it's Microsoft Press, O'Reilly, they're going to have exam prep books. Just go out to Amazon, do a search, and pretty much, again, they're all kind of coming from the same source. So it comes down to what matches your learning style best. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, but that's just legitimately, I can tell you, I don't remember the last time I opened up an exam prep book. Okay? Question 2, though not in this webinar, any recommendations for AZ500 security books? Microsoft doesn't have any materials on this. Okay. So yeah, it's not in this webinar, and honestly, I haven't really gotten fully geared up on that. I will tell you, kind of going through the beginnings, a lot of the security does overlap with what's in this course and what's in the architect courses and exams, all right? Not everything, certainly, and it definitely goes deeper into certain topics, but you will find a lot of overlap there. And beyond that, and again, I know this sounds like a cop-out, but look, when I go through this and when I hit the security one hard, I'm going to do exactly what I do for every exam. I'm going to go to that exam information page. In fact, let me just go ahead and pop that up really quickly. Let's see here. There we go. All right. So let's go and do a quick, since it was asked, I know this is an AZ-103, but you can do the same thing for AZ-103. I'm going to go AZ500, do a quick search. That's right. I use Bing. And go to exam AZ500. All right, and then what I do is I go to see details. And under details, I download the skills outline. Okay, and then literally I take this and I copy what's here and I pop it into an Excel workbook. And lots of stuff here. And I totally didn't do that right. Let's do a Control A, be a little bit more intelligent, right? And then go Excel. Pull up Excel. And you get the idea. I'm going to pop it into Excel. Actually, I have to pop it into Notepad first because it doesn't pop into Excel correctly. All right, because it does that. But I'd put it into, I would put it into Notepad and then over to Excel and see if I've got any of these things up here. Nope. But I put together a study guide, right? And I just go down and I say, okay, you know, which of these do I know? All right, I know advanced threat protection. I've got that. Okay. Security for Cosmos DB, shared access signatures. Most of these, just looking at this one random paragraph, I've got, right? But, you know, let's say I don't have security for HD Insight. What am I going to do? I'm just go up here, Azure. Now, watch this one not have anything, because literally I'm just doing this on the fly, which is the absolute worst thing you can do in any kind of demonstration, but I find I do it all the time. Okay, there we go. We do have it. Enterprise overview of enterprise security in Azure HD Insight from docs.microsoft.com. Yay! My off-the-cuff demonstration actually worked, and I don't look too foolish. All right, and so what I'll do is I'll go through here and say, all right, here we go. And I've got a 4-minute read, right, giving me the basics of this. Okay, and kind of going through here, and then I've got links. All right, so what are some things? What is this enterprise security package? Don't know what that is. That seems important. I click that and basically just navigate through another 4-minute read. And this is how I get a lot of information for the exams. Okay, as I just follow this process. Okay, hopefully that answers those very good questions. Next, I've got how many times does INE give students access to the Azure portal to students during hands-on training? Okay, right now we do have hands-on training as part of our Azure offering. Right now, it is bring your own subscription. So in other words, you need to have a subscription. That could be a trial subscription. It could be a subscription that you might have as part of an MSDN. If you've got MSDN, you have Azure. If you've got a corporate Azure account, you can spin off a subscription there and do some testing there, but just, of course, have to watch your costs. Now, we are looking at, and hopefully we'll get to the point where we'll be able to handle Azure hands-on, kind of similar to the way that we at INE do our Cisco hands-on, all right, where you get a certain amount of hands-on that really falls under our subscription, and then you can also buy more hands-on through our subscription. Honestly, it's not here. I'm not even going to try to give you any kind of ETA on that, but it is something that we're looking at, and I assure you that I will be publicizing that to a great degree when and if we manage to get that set up. All right. Also, I'll put a plug in. You know, feel free to follow me. Feel free to follow INE on Twitter because all of the news from INE is going to come out through that. But that's where we are with that. Not the perfect answer I'd like to give you, but it's where we are. All right. Now, awesome. Thank you very much. That's not even a question. That's just a thanks in there. You're absolutely welcome. Thank you very much for coming and showing up. So another question, how will you do the hands-on? Now, I just noticed that the hands-on for this that we've set up hasn't been loaded under INE. But I can show you the hands-on that we do have loaded for some of the INE Microsoft courses. We've got the hands-on loaded up for our Azure architecture. Let's see if I can pull that up. Course is, there we go. All right, trying to get one that is going to work out well. Deploying and configuring Azure infrastructure. This is actually part of the architect stream, okay? And, oh, I need to log in order to get this. All right, and so what I've got, and again, this is going to be something that is going to actually improve over time. But right now, we have a series of tasks. And for this course, I don't even know how many tasks they are, but we've got it in a PDF attached to the course. And if I click on that, Should open up that PDF. Okay, and this is a single file that has all of the tasks, but there is a table of content, right? And so this is for this course, all right? And so these are all the hands-on exercises you can see at the task level for this course, right? And so if I wanted to go through a task where I'm encrypting in Azure VHD, I could click on that and I'm gonna get the task information, all right? Now, the task information does not give you step-by-step, but right now, and again, this is something that's going to be a little more integrated eventually. Right now at, somewhere down here, at the bottom, we have solution videos, right? And so which one was that? That was Azure Disk Encryption. And if I wanted to see the solution, I could play the solution. It's a 12-minute solution, which literally just goes through the process. I'm going to stop this because showing a video on a webinar is never a good idea, but you get the idea, okay? Now, what about actually having the subscription? You don't have anything in Azure, you've never had anything in Azure. It's actually pretty simple to set up. I can go over here and I could say Azure free trial. Really, pretty much all you have to do is hit Azure and it's going to give you links pretty quickly to the Azure free trial. Here's an Azure free account. Awesome, get 12 months of free services. Want to start for free. It's just going to walk me through a process. First, I need to log in with an account. Okay. Now, this isn't going to work from the get-go because that account is already associated with a subscription. Okay. But it's going to walk me through the process. And I think right now, this is it yelling at me. Oh, there we go. Okay. And it's just really a very simple process. It takes about 5 minutes. You're going to go through. You do have to provide a credit card. It is not charged. And you have to provide a phone number, and that's just for identification purposes. Okay. And identify verification by card. You have to do both, and then sign an agreement. Okay. So I'm not going to go through the whole process, but again, it's going to walk you through. It's very easy to set up. Again, the only thing is it's $200 and it's 30 days. And if you wanted to go and start prepping right now, you have that. If you want to start prepping right now and we haven't gotten the PDFs loaded, send me an email and I'll send you a PDF of the tasks. As long as you have a subscription, I'll verify that, of course. Okay. Yeah, that is how you would go about getting your hands-on experience in Azure if you don't already have a subscription. Any other questions? Don't see any AZ-103 course materials clubbed together in an INE site like Linux Academy has. Okay, we actually do, and it's a little bit new. What you need to do, easiest way to do this is once you're on INE's site, if you go to Discover and go to Learning Paths, okay, it's down here. There's the Azure Administrator Associate Learning Path. And if I click on that, this actually lists out all of the courses that are going to be associated with this particular exam certification. Okay? And I'll tell you up here, I think it's 25 hours right now. There'll probably be another 10 hours of solution demos. There's 9 courses and 104 total videos. Okay? You can also do searches. Just do a search for Azure. And if I do Azure Admin, okay, here are a bunch of Azure Business Continuity services. So it is there. This is a relatively, we rebuilt our platform over the summer. There's still a few things that are not perfect with it, but it's a pretty cool platform. And we're evolving it. Okay? But we definitely do have a learning path set up. And if you looked for that learning path by any chance before, say, yesterday at about noon, that learning path didn't exist, but we did get it in there. I frankly whined enough that I think the people I whined to the right people, and we got the learning path up and running. All right, any other questions? All right, oh, there we go. How much does the INE or the AZ-103 course cost in INE? So that is a question that I can't answer because I'll get shot. No, I won't get shot. Here's the deal. What we do is we don't sell per course. We do sell a subscription. And right now we have a total access subscription. And I'm going to say $99 a month. I'm getting a thumbs up from our marketing person. and it's less than that if you subscribe for the full year. Okay, but it does give you access not just to this course, but to any other course that is in our library. All right, anything else? All right, I am not seeing any other open questions. First of all, I want to thank you all very much for coming with questions. It makes it much more entertaining for me. And I know that is the #1 goal of these, is to make them entertaining for me. But I hope you did get something out of this and kind of get a feel for what you're going to need to do for the 103 exam. I also hope that you'll consider, frankly, using INE for your exam preparation. You know, we're putting these out. And we're putting them out quickly, but we are putting them out with a lot of quality control. We want this to be the best preparation experience we can give you. So hopefully I'll see y'all. If you have any questions, again, my contact information, let's see, just because you can put that up again really quickly. Pop that up there. There we go. If you want to get in touch with me, feel free to do so. And I will definitely look to connect. Otherwise, have yourself a great rest of your day or evening, wherever you are. And hopefully I'll see you on another webinar. Keep an eye out. I'm doing webinars once a month, and hopefully I can get you on some more. Have a great day. And that is it.